Blind Shifters Radio. And today is Wednesday, July the 3rd, 2024. And our call-in number is 563-999-3581. And press 1, and that puts you into queue to talk to us, and we would love to hear your comments and questions because that makes this your show. And while we're waiting on Michael to dial in, I'll just say we had a lot of comments on yesterday's reading where Michael read the article or the explanation of the what is into being through Quantum StillPoint. And that is now on our YouTube channel. I added it to, if you go to Why Again and you go to Schedule and Quantum StillPoint, then it is a link. Once you go, I'm trying to multitask and open that page as I'm speaking. So the title, What is Into Being, Awakening Through Quantum StillPoint. And underneath it in red, it says, click here to listen to Michael read this article meditation. So if you click that, it'll take you to the YouTube channel where you can hear him reading it yesterday. And we got a lot of comments on that. So we hope you enjoyed it. If you didn't hear it, then go out there and click on that and listen. And then I just edited it so that that's basically Michael explaining the Quantum StillPoint and then reading what he wrote. And that is also now in writing, if you want to read it yourself, on that Quantum StillPoint page. And then there is another page that is Quantum StillPoint Experiences, which is all the different people who have called into the show or, given testimony about what their experience was like. And so the whole of yesterday's show, where Patrick was talking to Michael prior to and after him reading the article, that is on the experience page. So there's several places you can get that information, and hope that you enjoy it. And I'm going to say, welcome, Michael.
Well, thank you, dear heart. And I got feedback from several people yesterday that, like Patrick has shared, when he listened to that piece, that they went into a kind of a spontaneous still point. And so I'm back at the drawing board, editing once again. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it into a meditation, perhaps with music behind it, I'm not sure yet, but I'm going to do it more in a meditation style, do some guided breathing in it to enhance the meditative aspect of it. So we'll see how that all unfolds. The objective is to take the idea and the practice of this Quantum StillPoint as far around the globe as possible. And of course, there's not the hands-on component, but the energy dynamic is now, though I've only taken about 7 or 8 people through the process, the energy dynamic is now well established in the earth. So the meditation, we'll see what results it produces. I got several calls yesterday and notes from folks about what kind of changes they had experienced from it and how they went into a spontaneous meditation state. One gentleman, let me see here, let me find this. One gentleman in response to it had sent me an email back, and what he wrote as a result, he had actually done the Quantum StillPoint about 3 weeks ago now. And he said on reading the definition, the hardness upon which my structure is built is like a suit of armor I created. It's heavy and not as easygoing. The idea or phrase that was most notable with the Quantum StillPoint work was soften. Soften yourself. Soften in 2 ways is what you got out of it. To soften the hard beliefs that I built about my actuality, and then soften and uncover my reality. I find my guidance wanting to show me time and time again, how to lose the grip of my mind. I've read, sat in meditation, intensive retreats, ayahuasca, and now Quantum StillPoint. Since working with Michael for over 20 years, I've come to trust what I call our ladder work back home, climbing back to the truth. What occurred to me over the 3-day work intensive was the resistance and deceptions I've cultivated. This was the fruit of the work. And that's, an important part, as when I read that yesterday, I shared, is to become aware. Part of it is an educational process to become aware of just how you resist, how you block, remembering that Satan, again in Aramaic, is not, as the Greeks would have us running around terrorized, some kind of a horrid, creature with a red suited tail and a pitchfork. Quite literally means in Aramaic, the resistor, one who misleads. And so when you realize that physiological resistance is one of the ways, holding the breath and then tightening parts of the structure is one of the ways that we keep things hiding from ourselves. An important thing to educate yourself in is to become aware of that tightness, to become aware of energies moving within your form, and to learn to soften those. And once the restrictions that are first caused by the breath and then muscle tightness and tension and all the gyrations that people go through, over the years I've had several people who shared with me, oh yeah, my mother told me when I was a kid that, I would hold my breath until I turned blue and passed out. That's resistance. And of course, if resistance is passed on through the genes, then that's the kind of expression that's going to take place. And so part of the practice of the 3-day Quantum StillPoint Intensive is to become aware of where that resistance is and enter into the practice of softening it. And one of the key ways of softening it is through the use of Ruka-Dukuja, through the use of the breath. And we could call Ruka-Dukuja in our modern updated language, and you realize the Aramaic is a feminine elemental force that undoes the effects of our errors and teaches us the truth. We could translate that. That might be kind of hard for people to, have brain cells to really comprehend that. But in our modern computer world, where we pretty much all have brain cells for computers, we could call that feminine elemental force the super processor, which will never violate your free will. You have choice, and if you deny the flow of that power, then it won't move in you. That's what led them to say that, the Greeks have translated this one as another way to terrorize people, and I have seen people who've literally lost their lives over this terrible misinterpretation, where the Greeks translated, when Yeshua said the denial of Ruka-Dukuja, this feminine elemental force in you, the third unit of the Trinity, also known as the Holy Spirit, the denial of that, the Greeks translated, was the unforgivable sin. And I can remember talking to more than one person who in tears knew they were going to hell. Like, this was unforgivable. They literally believed, based on that stupidity, that they were going to, when they died, they would go to burn in a hellfire for eternity. When what the Aramaic says, in essence, and let's put it in our more computerese place, long form of forgiveness. You have a multi-generational database. There are some giant belief systems, giant BS in your system. And with your puny 9-bit mind, you could never process through them, but there is a power in you, a super processor that can. Deny it, and you'll be stuck in unforgiveness. You can't change that massive chunk of data on your own. Deny, it isn't that it was unforgivable, deny access to the superprocessor, and you're stuck in unforgiveness. Those dynamics aren't going to change in you. And there are just so many tragic. I mean, when you look at the way people suffer over some of this rage and unresolved power person dynamics of preachers with violent, vicious, screaming, raging fathers, mothers, playing those power person dynamics out and puking it out on their people who come to them as trust for guidance into the work of Yeshua, it's tragic. Actually, you know, there are so many things right now that the Christo-fascist game, people that want to basically take over the country, so many horrific things they're doing. I think they're literally criminal. When you come back to Yeshua and he says, don't you offend one of these little ones. And yet these raging judgments, which are all projections, are just unbelievable. Jeannie and I had an experience. We were speaking in Key West. This was way back. This is, I don't know, honey, 18 years ago, maybe 19?
Yeah, probably.
Would you like to share a little bit about that?
Well, the gentleman who was hosting us in Key West, Michael had known him for a long time, and that was the first time I had met him. And he wasn't like way out there or anything, but there was just something about him that I thought, well, you know, he's homosexual. But he was so sweet and so kind, and we went through a week of workshops, and then on Saturday when we did the breath work, and we took an intermission for lunch, and I actually asked him if I could talk to him. So we went aside in another room and sat on the couch, and I told him, you know, that the way that I had been raised was that, you know, you avoided people that were like that, and that it was awful. And I said, and I just want you to know, while I may not agree with your lifestyle choices, I want you to know that I truly cherish you. And he just grabbed me and hugged me, and you know, we've been great friends. And when I got back, I had sent out an email to several friends, and which included the pastor of the church that I was going to, and told them that I finally experienced what Jesus said about, you know, not judging the person, but just having love and compassion. And I explained, you know, the situation, what happened. And the pastor wrote back to me and said he would pray that God would bring me down.
Just insane.
Needless to say, I quit going to that church.
Yep. And guess what? I guarantee if we looked into his personal history and or his genetic history, guess who's hiding in the closet? Otherwise, there wouldn't be, you know, Paul lays this one out pretty well. He says, beware you who judge another, for that in which you judge another, you've been guilty of practicing. So it's all about taking responsibility for that which is based in hostility or fear, removing that which is based in hostility or fear, so that human life shows up and human life embraces and holds whoever, whatever. You can bet today the people that Yeshua hung out with, if he showed up with them at church, the doors would be blocked and he'd be banned for life by many of these. You know, I just happened to come across an interesting video on YouTube yesterday, and it was about the movie, the series, The Chosen, and in one of their PR pieces, apparently they'd been taking a video of their camera set. And one of the people working on the set had a small, like maybe a 6-inch pride flag. And these preachers just jumped on it. Oh, this chosen, it's Satan, it's the. I was like, man, what are you people doing in the back room that you go that nuts over a little piece of cloth that somebody's got on, on one of their, containers? Like, where does the meaning come from that's so disturbing for you, except for your own mind? And then the railing begins against another. And realizing that what I can't hold the space of love for is my work, not theirs. It was interesting, this young man, when I first started to work with him, the first time I went to Key West, he came to my workshops, and he'd been through quite a bit of trauma. His father, who, when he found out he was homosexual, he threw him out of the house, disowned him. And it had been, I don't even know now, something like maybe 20 years. He's in his mid-30s. And he would go back home at the holidays. I forget where he was from. He was somewhere up north. He would go back home to spend time with his mother. But his father wouldn't have anything to do with him, and he had nothing to do with his father. But after he did, the 9-day intensive and cleared up a lot of the issues that he had around Dad. He shared with me, he called me and shared that that first night that he was home for the holiday, his father came upstairs to his room and asked him how he was doing. And he said, my dad actually said to me that he just wanted to make sure that his little boy had everything that he needed. And this, to me, is the true meaning of what the gospel is, what the good news is. Of Course in Miracles says it beautifully. There is no place so holy upon the earth as a place where an ancient hatred becomes a present love. And that's what we're working to do with this work. Whether that ancient hatred is hatred of self, which is, so common in the culture, or hatred, rejection of others. It's time for healing. So I hope that fits and makes sense and opens the space, inspires. And Miss Jeannie, do we have anybody on the phone queue with a hand up or anything happening in the chat room?
It is all quiet.
Okay.
Oh, we had a hand just go up, and it's Miss Susan.
Oh, great.
610, you're on the air.
Hi. I have a question, but I also have a question that came right up just hearing Jeannie talk about this man. I'm glad he felt he could accept your cherishing of him when you had said you don't agree, or whatever the word was, with his lifestyle. And that is, to me, a harsh judgment. That feels like a harsh judgment, that his lifestyle, for the first thing, I'm not sure what you mean, unless you think he should be celibate, or there's something wrong with him having a partner of the same sex, and as if he had any choice except to, in order to meet your criteria, he would have to be celibate, I guess. Is that what you mean?
No, I was just, it's like with anything, not just homosexuality, but, if there's a person who is, an alcoholic or a prostitute or, whatever, I don't have to agree with their choice for what they're doing in their life, but I can, quote unquote, love them where they are, regardless of what they're doing. And I think that's what, Jesus, when he was with the prostitute or with the Samaritans or, whoever, and he actually told the woman, you don't know who you're worshiping, but he still expressed love towards her and was willing to support her and help her where she was. It's like not trying to change a person, but accepting them and having compassion for them regardless of the choices that they make. It doesn't mean I have to agree with it or think that it's right or wrong, but just, having love for them.
Yeah, it wouldn't be your choice, but in something like that, I don't think we have any choice. Of course, we have a choice to put on a veneer. Somebody who's bisexual, for instance, as I am, chose to be heterosexual in my lifestyle because I had the choice. If I hadn't had the choice, I'm not sure I would have felt comfortable with your saying, I don't agree, as if it is a choice. I could make a genuine choice. In fact, I think what happens, I went through a very serious gay phase and then somehow went the other way, and it had nothing to do with any decision I made. And emotionally, I'm still very much a gay person as well as a straight person, and my teaser today is there an issue in your life, this is for my group, is there an issue in your life that has remained with you throughout your life that you've had to deal with, and how are you doing with it? And is that the cross you bear, or what is it for you? I'm getting off on a tangent. But
no, that's fine.
I don't even think it's a question of agreeing with it as if there's a choice. I'm pushing. I know I'm pushing, Jeannie, and I apologize because
no need to apologize. It was just an awesome example of, just like Jesus, regardless of where people were. I mean, he hung out with people that the church people, the temple leaders wouldn't have anything to do with. And yet that's who he chose to reach out to and who he associated with, and he shared his love with them where they were. He didn't try to change them or, get them to follow him or anything. He just loved for them. And I think that Bill understood that from me. Of course, conversation, I just sentences of our conversation. But such love between us. Like I said, out and grabbed me and hugged me, And, I mean, everything was just awesome. And we've,
I think,
talked.
I'm not sure did you use that word, although I don't agree with your lifestyle or whatever it was? What did you say to him? Do you remember?
Well, that's been like 18 years ago, but,
yeah.
Probably something along those lines, because I don't agree with that lifestyle. It's not for me, but it's not for me to judge, whatever lifestyle any person chooses to take, but just to love them where they are and just to be the space of love for them and to be supported by them and support them and have a friendship. And, I have a lot of friends. I have a girlfriend that's been, what I would consider like a best friend since we were 5 years old. And I don't agree with her lifestyle. I mean, every picture she posts on Facebook, she's got a drink in her hand. And her mom died from over-drinking and her liver just dissolving. And it's like, Terry, you should see what your mom went through and how it took her early, and you need to, do something different. But I'm not about to change her. I hold the space that she sees she's destroying her body, but, that's her choice, and I can be with her and have a good conversation, hug her, love her, and she can drink and I don't, And, that's okay. It's just, being the space of love for her where she is. But that doesn't mean I have to agree with what she's doing. She's destroying her body. But that's her choice.
But you're making a parallel between being homosexual and being an alcoholic. I think that's where
it's with anything. I think it's with anything, whether it's homosexuality or whether it's alcoholism or whether it's, prostitution or, drug addiction or, whatever. Anybody that has a different lifestyle, just making the point that, allow them to be where they are and hold the space of love for them and just be there for them and be their friend and have compassion for them instead of saying, oh, no, you're, lower than me or you're worse than me or you're, or whatever. Just being there for them and accepting them where they are. But it doesn't mean I have to agree with their lifestyle. It's not right for me. Here? It may be perfect for them. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. So one of the things, Susan, I think you dropped out of what Jeannie explained, and it was shortly after we met, and she was coming out of a very fundamental Baptist background, and she shared with him that she had been taught all her life all of the derogatory terms you could put onto a homosexual lifestyle. That's where she was coming from. And, being from the little town of Bristol, her ears were, I think, very tender. So with that kind of brainwash and that kind of pushing, it would be a reasonable thing, I think, for her to say, I don't agree with your lifestyle. And I don't think it needs to be put into any other context in terms of whether, what else is good or bad or, what category is worse or better or, however it all fits. But the point, for me, the point that I got out of it when that happened was the opening of a mind that had been closed by a brainwash of the culture to heal that and to bring forward the presence of love for someone that
I think that's wonderful.
And when somebody's been taught, it was profoundly powerful. We've been together 20 years, so that's around 4 decades or so of brainwashing. And when we went to Key West, of course, that's the lifestyle in Key West, and then to have spent time with this gentleman and to open to, oh, I got it. And then, to me, that Jeannie took it to the next level of writing to church members saying, hey, guys, this is what it really meant.
Yeah. That leads me to another question. It's another branch of, you gave the example of the woman caught in adultery. And that is Jesus said, neither do I condemn you, go and sin no more. So taking that story, I think the idea of committing adultery, that has to do with, if you're committing adultery, it means you're acting in a way that the culture doesn't approve of, and maybe you're a married person who's cheating on her mate. That would be true adultery in my mind, and we're getting nitpicky here. But I don't even think that being homosexual is a sin. I don't even think that having a homosexual relationship is a sin. And I wonder whether Jesus would say, go and be who you are, but don't sin, i.e. don't have any sexual relationships with someone of your same sex. And I hope to God Jesus would never say that to a homosexual person. My priest in my church is a homosexual, is married to a man. My organist is a young homosexual about to get married to a man. They are so happy and so loving that I just can't see it in the same category as somebody choosing to be a drug user or an alcoholic. it seems as if they didn't ask to be either way. I don't think anyone asks to be either way. Now, there may be trauma with some people, so they have no choice, and they end up being gay because they're not well. And that's true for heterosexuals, too. I don't know whether I'm making any sense to you at all, but I'm making it to myself.
Well, for me at this point, it's apples and oranges for Jeannie's story. That Jeannie's story was, I've been brainwashed all my life, and I realized it was an error, and she was able to go back to those who brainwashed her and straighten them out. To me, that's the miracle of healing.
That's great, as far as it goes. I know I'm really being pushy here. It's great, Jeannie, and
it's okay.
It's great. But there's another step to be taken, in my opinion, over here. That it is not in the category of choosing to hurt yourself with alcoholism or drugs. There's no choice at all. This is, God made me this way. And maybe that isn't true, but love would open that door. Love would not know the answer to that question, at the very least. Well, okay. And my other question is quite unrelated. If you don't want to stay on this, because there's no need to. I've said my piece.
I mean, if there's something else to say about this, I put forward my thoughts. I don't have any other thoughts on it. If Jeannie does, but otherwise, let's go for your next question.
And the next question is, what does quantum mean? Quantum StillPoint as opposed to StillPoint.
Well, let me open the folder and let me read something from the definition that we read yesterday.
Okay.
Just give me 1 second to find it here. Technology.
Because I looked up the word quantum, and I couldn't match it with what you're teaching. I couldn't put it together with that.
So the one quote that one of the quotes I integrated in it was from Max Planck. Max Planck in 1918, if I remember correctly, got a Nobel Prize. I'm remembering that's the year it was. And the Nobel Prize was for coming up with the theory that's called quantum theory. And quantum theory says that, the what at that time, and to many people's minds still today because it's so difficult to understand, that there are electrons, protons, neutrons, and there you go. Now you've got an atom, and then we got matter, and blah, 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 blah. So Max Planck came up with quantum theory, and he totally obliterated the whole idea that there's even such a thing as matter. And it was 26 years after he won the Nobel Prize that he wrote this statement. And this kind of opens the door to at least coming up to the edge of quantum theory. So in all my research, this is a quote directly from Max Planck, I have never come across matter. To me, the term matter implies a bundle of energy which is given a form by an intelligent spirit. And these bundles of energy are what Max Planck called quanta. And something he's saying organizes these quanta into what most of science calls electrons, protons, neutrons, atoms, and therefore matter. But he's saying, no, we need to break it down to a whole different level. And these quanta, these energetic packets, are organized into form, he goes on to say. To me, the term matter implies a bundle of energy which is given form by an intelligent spirit. As a man who's devoted his whole life to the most clear-headed science, to the study of matter, I can tell you, as a result of my research about atoms, this much: there is no matter as such. All matter originates and exists only by virtue of a force which brings particles of an atom to a vibration and holds this most minute solar system of an atom with the atom together. We must assume behind this force the existence of a conscious, intelligent mind. This mind is the matrix of all matter. How that fits with and why I've called this process Quantum StillPoint is, let's imagine someone has the ABC disease. And there's a whole system, there's a whole set of thoughts about the ABC disease. It happened because of this, and it happened because of that, and this occurred, and that occurred, and and here's how we're going to treat it. And that's all based on a totally, completely fake, false understanding of how the world works. That's why just before then I said, let me get back here. Or maybe it was just after that. I'm breaking it up here. Let me find this next paragraph I want to share. Forgive me for searching around in this.
No, you're trying to answer my question. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm working on it. So, one of the other paragraphs in the writing, working within beliefs rather than the actuality of what exists is somewhat like rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. The band sounds better, but the ship is still going down.
I remember that part.
One of the objectives of Quantum StillPoint, one of the objectives of this whole teaching, is for you and I to have direct contact with actuality rather than living through the beliefs and the perceptual constructs of our minds. And so I'm working with the process to get people to at least begin to move in the direction of literally forgetting everything you thought you knew about matter and about the world, and stepping into recognizing there's something that holds, let's say for the person who has the ABC disease, that they're going to go in and they're going to say there's this organ's broken and this one's twisted and that one's that and this is going on and we're going to do this and we're going to drug it and we're going to surgery it and do and then we're going to fix it, and we're rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic with everything we do. We can, seem to make some improvements there, but we're still rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. What holds the ABC disease in place? If Max Planck, as a Nobel Prize-winning physicist, is correct, and it took him 24 years from the time he won his Nobel Prize until he made that statement that I just read about quanta. What holds? This is for me the difference. What holds the ABC disease in place? And if we move to the actuality, it's mind energy. Opening words in the book of John. In the beginning was the mind energy, and the mind energy became flesh. Job, that which I feared most, that which I dreaded has come upon me. That's quantum physics. And so what I'm observing, like doing the 3-day process as I've recently assembled it for the first time in 50 years of developing this work, what I'm experiencing or what I'm seeing with each person that does it, like for instance, Patrick shared yesterday. Here's a guy who is one of the most knowledgeable body workers I've ever known. I've known him for a half a century. And he has, this is one of the reasons I shared this yesterday as I was talking about it. You know, he does this thing called centerline balancing. And 20 years ago, Patrick took me through a centerline balancing exercise. So he knows the structure so intimately.
Mm.
And literally in that centerline balancing exercise that he did with me, I went and spoke that night and had the clearest, most razor-sharp mind that I've ever had. I mean, ever in my whole life, before, since. And that's how knowledgeable Patrick is about the human form and how he works. Like when I first met Patrick, I came out of the business world. I had 3 businesses. I had 60 employees. I worked 18 hours a day, 9 days a week, and my body was like a set of rocks. Patrick actually invented a whole new system of body work. My back, my shoulders, my muscles were so tight, it hurt his hands so much to work on me that he developed a whole system where he put me on the floor and used his feet on me when I first started working with him.
Wow.
And over a period, as Patrick shared, over a period of 3 years, he realizes, because he understands how energy flows through the body and how the centerline balancing is so important, he's worked on a tip in his pelvis for years, and specifically for 3 years, tried to get this misalignment of his pelvis fixed using everything he knew to do. And the final stage of the Quantum StillPoint process, when we finished, he got up off the table and his pelvis was back in place. Why? My take is there's a still point. The still point is a place where there's enough energy moving in the structure that the breath spontaneously stops, which for me means that resistance is gone from the form, and one moves into high-speed, fast-forward processing. Literally, I've seen people move through years of trauma in 2 minutes in a still point, if somebody has the blessing of having that long a still point. And so it's a powerful processing place. And then the next level of it, which I shared when I first spoke about it on the show, was an accidental discovery. A gentleman named Michael had been introduced to our work, had been doing the work for a while. I'd never met him. We finally did connect. And then about a year later, he was traveling through here. He'd never done any live workshops or anything. He'd done the radio show. We'd had several conversations and such. And he was coming through here on his way to, or at least going, he wasn't actually coming this route, he was going a different route to his mother's funeral. I said, well, if you've got the space, because he was going through some physical trauma, then, stop and we'll do some work on the way back. And I ended up kind of by accident, I think really by design, pulling out some of the work that I was trained in literally 50 years ago in my early medical training. And I assembled that with some of the latest stuff that I'm doing. And what I saw happen was, and you've heard me say it 1,000 times, in order to heal, you got to be out of your mind. Michael went out of his mind. So the difference between the still point, resistance is down, the resistor, Satan, out of the way. Superconductor state, you can process a whole lot of energy in a big hurry. but the mind's still holding the structured BS in place.
Mm-hmm.
Quantum StillPoint, why I named it that, is the point where not only is one in the superconductor state, but, and the way I expressed it in the writing was, if even just for an instant the mind lets go, if the thing that holds that whole structure in place lets go for a fraction of a second, everything has the opportunity to shift, i.e. Patrick's pelvis. 3 years of work by a guy who really knows the structure, and it shifted in that second. Michael, I don't know if you were probably on the show where Michael called in, and he went from, he had spent years, he had been in the airline industry, and I hope I've got this story correct in terms of details, and if it's not precisely correct, it's pretty close, but he had been in the airline industry, so he had free air miles to travel, and he traveled all over the country. One of the main things he was trying to deal with was headaches that were, if I remember correctly, were about a level 7 or a level 8, and he'd have 15 or 16 of them a month. And that was, I mean, he'd spent years trying to regain his health in that regard. And so we did the 3-day Quantum StillPoint. He was the first person I did it with. And when we talked, Jeannie, how long was it we talked to him? Maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks, 3 weeks later?
Yeah, maybe a week and a half or 2 weeks, yeah.
About a week and a half, 2 weeks. It was closer because we were talking in terms of months, that in the month. So it had been, if I remember correctly, it was about 3 weeks later. And he had gone from those level 6, 7, 8 headaches multiple times a month to where he, in that 3 week or so period, he'd had one level 3 headache that only lasted for a couple hours, and he'd have these headaches would last all day, 15 or 16 of them a month. Again, my details might be off, but it's in the radio show. And so what my take is, and what my objective in the Quantum StillPoint when I'm working with someone is to educate people on where the resistance is, what the resistance feels like, how to breathe into it, to soften it, to open it, which means that you crank up energy flow. If you're, my background's I think in terms of physics, my background's in electronics with a side study in physics. And, let's say you've got a light in the ceiling and you've got a rheostat, and you can make the light really bright or you can make the light very dim. How does that happen? Well, there's 120 volts that comes through the switch to the light. And if I have the dimmer in one position where it's wide open, there's no resistance. So the full voltage is going to the bulb, and bang, you've got a nice bright light. When I turn the rheostat, what I'm doing is I'm introducing resistance into that circuit. When I introduce resistance into that circuit, I reduce the energy flow, and the light bulb dulls. That's the equivalent, of Satan. The idea in Aramaic of Satan is that resistance. It stops the flow of energy. So when we can educate somebody where the resistances are, and they can pay attention to their form, and and it doesn't matter, it's a big toe, or it's the buttocks, or it's the neck, or it's the ears, wherever the tension is, it's the jaw. If someone understands that and is able to breathe into and start to learn to let that go, then literally the energy flow is cranked up. And if we can get the mind to just say, I give for 1 second, that's the Quantum StillPoint. That's where it moves from our belief systems about matter into quantum shift. And things like, 15 level 8 headaches go away. And yes, there's one level 3 headache for a couple hours. Or a pelvis that's, just out of alignment. It's been out of alignment his whole life, and he's tried and worked and tried and worked and tried and worked, and literally 10 seconds later, it's in alignment naturally. And, you know, what he shared with me, I don't remember whether he spoke with this on the show or not. He said, and sometimes he said, I noticed that I'm back out of alignment, but and I've never been able to do this, but now I can put it back in because he's processed whatever that was about. So that's, to me, is the objective of the Quantum StillPoint, and it's physiologically induced.
Mm.
And it comes about as a result of, I mean, literally, it's my whole half century of training. There are probably, if I sat down and thought about each tool that's in it, there are probably maybe 12 or 14 different major educational experiences that I've had in terms of how do we get this physiological system to open up for energy to flow properly, and then how do we collapse what doesn't belong and get out of the mind. Also, the restoration, you know, the energy field work, which you did when you were at Heartland, is about the core of the antenna structure, which is what brings information into the human form, is literally the bony structure of the body. It is literally a self-adjusting antenna. And so part of the energy field work is restoring the integrity of the antenna, opening the blocks in the antenna so that a full complement of energy, not only is resistance reduced, like the rheostats turned up, but also the antenna is aligned so that there is a full flow, which basically, you know, flushes, blows off what doesn't belong when you get that. You know, I think I used yesterday the example of, so there's some mud on the driveway and I'm trying to wash it, and I can't get it to move. What do? I kink the hose, the pressure builds up in the hose, and the flush washes away the mud. That's what happens in that still point.
You know, it's funny and wonderful, and synchronicity-wise, Dr. Tim has been talking about allowing, softening even the same words in the work he's doing with the Way of Mastery. And your work and his are just intertwined at this point. The vocabulary is so similar. And he's saying not only that, but Guy Finley's work or other people's work, Michael Singer.
Yeah. There's only one thing that works. There's only one thing that works. Although that phrase I like to quote often from Winston Churchill. You know, we have the privilege of being separated by a common language. There's only one thing to talk about.
Yep. The Hindus used to say in the Rig Veda, it says, truth is one. They just call it by various names.
There it is. Yeah. There's only one operative principle in the universe. You know, the psychologist calls it the collective unconscious that is everywhere present and has all the power and is in control. And the physicist calls it energy and says it's everywhere present and has all the power and is in control. And the theologians call it God and it's everywhere present and has all the power and is in control. Everybody's got a different word for it. It's all the same thing. The key is, how do we move out of the resistance stage of life?
Right.
Which, if we don't have an ancestry that has, you know, done their work, therefore we're the early adopter. It was really powerful for me, the last quantum session that I did with somebody, the last 3-day session, was a gentleman who, the work he did changed my physiology. I mean, I came home and I was just like, my whole, literally parts of my own physiology that were in resistance let go. And I acknowledged him each day for the work he was doing. And just about everybody down through the years in doing this work that I've worked with is an early adopter, you know. They're the first one in the family system that said, I'm going to pick up some tools and do something about my life. This gentleman shared his memory of being a kid and how his parents and people in his family system were doing their work. And that his whole life, I mean, I'm not even sure what age he is, he's probably 40-some, and that his whole life he's been working on. He went through a 2-year training course in Jungian analysis and had done Jungian analysis, and he'd done several different, types of therapy and such. And I experienced the biggest shifts in me from the work he did, and my take is because he'd been doing his work and his family system has been doing his work. He wasn't the early adopter. And so he brought a whole different level of accomplishment.
So
and I got blessed by it. It's like, hey, doesn't get better than this.
God, and it's conveyed not only through your knowledge. It's conveyed not only in your knowledge, but in your absolute being. You just are that, and you can pass it on. That is so cool.
Yeah, when I read the quotes from Max Planck. I mean, I would love to have just had some time to hang out in Max Planck's energy field. Carl Jung, oh, what a treasure it would have been just to be in his space.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we did get to do back about 15 years ago, we were invited to the birthday celebration, which was carried out by the Danish scientific community and the work of, let me get my brain,
Niels Bohr.
Niels Bohr. We were invited by Niels Bohr, who's another Nobel Prize winner, physicist. We were invited by his daughter to come and present and to attend a 3-day conference in his honor held by the Scientific Society of the country of Denmark. And one of the things we got to do was to sleep in the bedroom where all of his notes and his paraphernalia was, which was pretty close to getting to be in his field.
Wow, yeah.
So felt touched by that. It's pretty sweet.
Yeah.
So one of the other things I'm going to do, in part inspired by you yesterday and your feedback and our conversations about the Quantum StillPoint, is I'm rewriting and putting it into more of a meditation form. I may or may not do it with music, but I'm going to do it again, only do it as the whole thing as a guided meditation, so that it will hopefully help people to get into that flow or into that space more easily.
That's great.
Yeah, so thank you for that.
You're welcome. Thank you for the show yesterday. They talk about theta waves and different number hertz music. There are these videos on, I'm curious, I use them when I'm teaching my fitness classes because, there's a time lag of a split second where if I'm on my beat, they are behind me a little bit. They don't see what I do until a split second. And so I can't use dancey music where we're all dancing to the same beat. It's the same beat, but it's not synchronized. And it drives any musician nuts, probably anybody else too. So what I've been doing is putting on these 442 or whatever the number is, hertz, background music, which you might want to use for your meditation.
Sounds.
There are many.
Yep.
Yeah, sounds, but it sounds, but it's almost like the edge of music. It's not really structured the way a piece of music would be.
Right.
But it's the sounds, and you don't have to, get permission because it's not copyrighted.
Right.
Just I think
copyrighted.
It's just, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking that there are some sounds that they've discovered, frequencies that they've discovered that help to open the parasympathetic nervous system, activate the parasympathetic nervous system. And I've been thinking about using that because that's all part of it, is getting out of sympathetic dominance where most people live into parasympathetic. So I've been thinking about perhaps putting that sound in the background.
Good idea.
So it's a new idea coming to do that, and that came out of our conversations yesterday. So mucho gracias.
Oh, you too. And thanks for letting me push on my issue.
Anytime.